This is Paranormal Borders Lab podcast, brought to you by the MexicaliBiennial, with your host Ed Gomez.
Welcome to the Paranormal Borders podcast edition. Today we have artist Isidro Pérez García. And Isidro is a borderless artist from Santa Ana, California, and Atotonilco El Grande, Hidalgo, Mexico. He works across a range of medium, including painting, sculpture, installation, and community-based art, to investigate his experience as a formerly undocumented immigrant to the United States and as a present-day campesino urbano, which I'd want to hear more about and unpack that, exactly what that means for you. His work aims to dispel dominant notions of modernity, tradition, capitalism, and migration, and recover indigenous and anti-colonial practices. He obtained a BFA from Cal Arts and a Master's of Fine Art in Visual Arts from UC San Diego. So, Isidro, thank you for joining us today with the Paranormal Borders podcast, where we try to find the connections between the paranormal and art practices. So I always try to talk a little bit about the artist's background and their history. So do you remember a moment in your life when you first realized that, hey, I want to be an artist?
Well, yeah, kind of. I think I had been very much interested in art since I was a kid. My family, my mom, and I have older siblings. They will engage a lot in like craft. A lot of times it was like projects for school and stuff. So I was actually I grew up seeing them and being really like inspired or being into those projects, right? And then I was always interested in it. When I was in high school and middle school, I was taking classes. But then I think when I went to college, I had to kind of think about. I wasn't really sure what to study, right, in college, and I felt like art wasn't really viable, and I was thinking I needed to pick something else. So I kind of just started taking classes in community college in Santa Ana Community College, and I wasn't really focusing art. I was focusing like trying to figure out what career I want to study or what I want to do with my life. But I was doing art outside of the school. Sometimes I would take like classes that I was interested in, like spray, like what do you call airbrushing or painting classes. But yeah, I had not taken that initiative, right? That of thinking that I wanted to be like study art. I just wanted to be like an artist, like an artist that kind of almost like self-taught. Even though I had already taken classes, I wanted to explore my own abilities. And then, so I did it. I don't think I remember specifically a moment when I thought like, oh, I want to be an artist, because I feel like I've always kind of been an artist. But I know when I decided to kind of take art more like seriously, or to kind of decide to go back to school to learn art. And that was more when I was kind of in this transition where I was starting to. I had quit my job. I had worked undocumented for a long time after I had already gone to school. I had gotten like an associate's degree, but it didn't really help me in anything. I ended up like working undocumented in this factory for over like 7 or 8 years. Where there was like exploitation, and because I was an immigrant, there was not a lot of protection, so I was very vulnerable. But when I was able to fix that situation, when I was able to become like a resident, I kind of was met with this decision of like if I wanted to keep working in that place, or if I wanted to do something else with my life, basically. And so, or like keep working in that kind of field, because I had kind of quit that job, and I was working in another factory, more like high end kind of wood shop, which was kind of similar, the same kind of dynamic with the boss, like kind of with all this pressure. Even though I was being paid a little better, because I had like my residency, I was still like not really happy and wanted to explore the idea of like if I could do art like professionally, right? Like to go to an institution and get the degrees. And at first I was like, didn't think I could do it. My wife Adriana, my partner, also we collaborate in a lot of art projects. She encouraged me. She had already gone through the education system. She had graduated from UCI. She had got an MFA. And so I was like, I started seeing the possibilities, right, to kind of being mentor and having like kind of support. Because before I had nothing, I didn't really know, even though I had gone to community college, I didn't really know how to make that next step to go into like higher education, as you call it. And that's when I decided that I wanted to go back to kind of learn art and take it more seriously.
Is that when you entered Cal Arts, or?
Yeah, I because I had like my AA in liberal arts from Santa Ana College, I had already taken a lot of the classes well, you have to take and so I couldn't just go into Cal Arts. I felt like I needed to go and finish my get the associate's degree in Santa Ana College from art, so I could transfer to Cal Arts so that I could like maybe build more work and have like a portfolio that was stronger before I could like transfer, because I had not taken art classes, even though I was doing a lot of art on my own time. And so I went back to Santa Ana College and just took the rest of the classes that I needed, which was mostly all art classes. I no longer had to take any math or science because I had already taken all of that. And so I went to Santa Ana College for like a year. And then after that, once I graduated, I got a second associate's degree, but this time in art. I was again like thinking, okay, so like I need to continue, right? That was the plan. And so we started thinking about schools to apply to. And at first, I mean, I had no idea what schools were good, right, for art. And so I considered different schools. I applied to different schools. I applied to Cal State Fullerton, which I got accepted. But some of the other schools, it was kind of harder. Like I applied to Cal State Long Beach, and that one was because I felt like in the art world you need to think about what schools are like, kind of have this reputation, right, of being good schools or good art schools, schools that have good departments also to grow as an artist. And I thought like Long Beach would be a good choice because it's close by. And but I had like for some reason when I was in Santa Ana College, I had like one of my grades pulled down my GPA, or I guess what do you call it, the GP
Grade point average.
Grade point average, yeah. And so I was unable to clear it, and so there was like this F that I had because I didn't drop the class, and so because of that I wasn't really like able to get into other I think colleges around here, because of that. Also because there's different politics like of like where you live and stuff, and so yeah, I was kind of thinking of other choices of like what were the other decisions that could benefit me. And we started thinking about like private institutions and thinking about how they don't look into the grades, right, into the grade point average, because a lot of all these other institutions, that's what they look at. So they kind of, we figure, okay, they look at the work, they look at the art, they go through the art, like so we started thinking about like private institutions like Cal Arts and Otis, and at first I didn't even know what Cal Arts was. I was just like really clueless, and so but once we applied, we put down the portfolio, And we just put out the applications. I actually got accepted to both, to CalArts and to Otis. And so I had like these three choices, which was like Cal State Fullerton, which is close to me, and then I had these other schools in LA that are more private and are more costly, right? Because at least that's what I thought. But then we looked at the prices, and it turned out that CalArts was actually more liable, more viable. Like it was actually, it turned out to be cheaper because they were giving me like what do you call it? Like a scholarship. Yeah. And so like Cal State Fullerton wasn't doing that. And so it was actually, it turned out to be like a better deal because also Otis was giving me, making me start like as a sophomore instead of a junior. So I had to do like 3 years instead of 2, so it would have been more expensive. So it turned out that CalArts was a better choice, but I had to kind of stay in Santa Ana because moving would have been more expensive. So I figured, driving is actually cheaper. I had a Prius, and so I decided that CalArts was a better choice for me as an artist. That it was a more recognizable institution, and so we decided to go for it because it was also kind of like a privilege to be accepted into that institution. So once I went to see where they give you the walk, like they walk you around and show you the institution, I was very like pleased with how they were speaking about how they cultivate the artist and stuff like that. So I was like, this is exactly what I want. Like I don't want this pressure, or I don't want this idea that I need to become a certain type of artist, like either a painter or a sculpture or something like that. It was more like free, it was like they were offering me that kind of freedom of digging into my artwork and really thinking about what I was doing.
So when you were at CalArts, is that when you started to bridge or bring some of your family history, your experiences in Hidalgo, or this campesino urbano concept? Is that where it started to develop?
Yeah. That's where I started to focus more on my identity, thinking about like ideas of my history. I was actually trying to stay away from that, so I didn't want to be like put into this box of who I was. But then I realized, that that's who I am, and so I didn't want to think that I was this artist, that didn't have to put up with that. They didn't have to think about those things. Because nothing is ever neutral, and so I that's where I started thinking about ideas of identity, of migration, and really digging into who I was and what was important to me and my practice.
Yeah, I think that's an important, because my graduate experience was just the opposite, where we were really taught not to take things to the personal. It was filtered through this post-studio practice institutional critique model that kind of disregarded or didn't go over Chicano art, for example, or taking things autobiographical. It was more about art for art's sake. So I think that was probably a really good fit for you, right, where you were able to really develop your art practice. Bring in your family history, right, growing up in Hidalgo, Mexico, those experiences. And I see that find its way through your work, right?
Yeah. It's I think it's because it's important. Like I always did, like my experience as an immigrant person to the United States has always been important, right? And so the art that I was doing when I was undocumented and stuff, that was a lot of like very personal stuff. It was very like always thinking about like how I felt, or like how I was living through this stage, right, where like I felt like documenting was important, like documenting my story, like writing. I also like to write like my thoughts, poems, and so I thought those things were important because I was undocumented. So I thought that our story, or my story, also like was kind of interesting and important, like it needed to be told sometimes, because I feel like a lot of times it's told by other people, and it's like I wanted like to be like able to tell my own story. and to be able to think through like what it meant for me. The idea of campesino urbano came out more, I think, more when I was in UCSD. I transferred to UCSD or straight out of Cal Arts. So I was already thinking a lot about these things. And in UCSD, I had to do like this, like first year review and like thesis show. And so I was thinking about like who I was, my place, right? And who I was as a person. And I was thinking about the fact, like where I come from as a campesino, like as a person from El Campo, right? Like a person that had to work in this. Like when I was a kid, I used to help out, like go and like pick, get the crops, the maize, and do things with my family. And so I consider myself a campesino. But then coming here and being kind of like uprooted from where I was, like the rancho, and being here in the city, it's kind of like a different dynamic where the campesino needs to kind of build his own ways and also adjust and conform to a lot of things. So it's like it's this idea, right, that even though I am like an immigrant here, that I still come from somewhere, and urbano is because the city life is so like different from rural life, where rural life, I feel like time is almost different. It's experienced different, like it's experienced slower. There's not so much noise. There's not so much cars. There's a different kind of experience. So I wanted to kind of think about those two ideas because it was relating to my practice.
I remember you were telling us a story about when you were working here in the United States and you got a job working for a furniture manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And you were making high-end furniture, and you were maybe in your mind thinking about who might be using this furniture or where this furniture might be then shipped off to. Mm-hmm. And then you start your graduate program at UC San Diego, and you notice that the furniture that you were using in the classroom it was manufactured by the same plant that we were working at earlier. So how did that feel for you?
I think it felt like a little bit traumatizing. I was like surprised because I wasn't really expecting it. Like I had been doing work with that specific like wood shop. I had already been experimenting, with ideas about them because of the experience that I had with the exploitation and taken advantage of, right? And so I was like, when I was in UCSD, I was like walking around, going to my car, I think, and all of a sudden I see this piece of furniture that I right away recognize because it's the same like wood, it's the same finish. And but just to make sure, I went to check, the label, and I saw the label. I was like, so I took a photo and everything to document the experience. But I did feel a little traumatized. I started thinking a lot about like my journey and like how I ended there and like how this place is kind of still exploited, right? And like how I chose to kind of to study art, to move away from that kind of reality, and then that reality kind of was also there, right? And but it was hidden. Like you don't know who's really building a lot of the furniture and who's doing a lot of the work in around, right, the UCSDs. You don't know a lot of where the work comes from and stuff like that. So I was thinking like, wow, there's like immigrant labor like here, immigrants that have been exploited in other jobs, and so I started thinking like, like this institutional critique idea of like the institution was part of the system of exploitation, and started thinking about ways of like talking about that and thinking about like how we can not bring a light to it, not bring attention, but just think about those things, think about like the invisible labor that is behind a lot of the institutions, a lot of the businesses, stuff like that that make those things work or run. And it's because it's a lot of times it's cheap labor, it's people that are being exploited. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, then I started feeling kind of like like I had started having like this like fight mode, like I wanted to like fight back or do something about it. I do something like an expression or something to bring in that experience. And so I was thinking of, like, I started thinking about how I could get like my hands on some of this furniture and how I could like do something with the furniture, turn it into an art project, an art piece to talk about that. Because like UC San Diego is so close to the border, and I was there, right, experiencing this, and so I was like, it was hard to find ways to use the furniture and to do kind of use it for an art project, and eventually I figure out like, I could like go into this place that I found out about where they send off the furniture. It's like this garage
like
or
a
something.
Boneyard.
Yeah,
for
like
the
this
furniture.
place where they send the furniture and they sell it, but cheaper. And so you could go and see all the discarded furniture. And so I went looking for furniture that was made in the place where I used to work, and I found like this big giant conference table that was like perfect, because I thought, yeah, this is it, like we can. I started thinking about how I could use this conference table to talk about ideas of like phenomenology of how things like appear to us, right, and what things appear to us, and what like what is the kind of furniture that the different people see, right, when they like, or like types of tables, right? That's where I started thinking about tables. What are the types of tables that appear to people, and why are they different? And I was thinking like the conference table is this table that represents like almost like power, right? Like this, like UCSD kind of executives sitting around making decisions, right? But yet this conference table is built on the backs of immigrants. So that was like super deep. So I was like really like thinking, this is good, I gotta like keep going. And so I decided, I applied for a grant and I got it in UCSD, and then that led me to buying the table, and it was big, so I had to figure out how to move it. I got the table, and it was right before the pandemic. It's actually just, the pandemic was just happening, so I had to kind of move fast, because I was afraid that I was gonna be that the stores were gonna close and stuff, so I wasn't gonna be able to get this table, or it was gonna take me longer, because I was also moving to Santa Ana because I couldn't be in San Diego because of the pandemic. We weren't having classes, so I was able to get the table to Santa Ana, and then I started thinking about how to transform it and how to like turn it into something that belongs to the more to the people that worked on it, like or might have worked on it, which are the immigrant people, right? Immigrant laborers, and that's like my family, right? Me. And so I asked my brother, who still works in that same place, to collaborate, and we started like cutting like this groups on the wood, and making this kind of like this, what do you call, they're just like images that go on the table, on top of the table, almost like a toy theater, and so it has like two sides to it, and in the middle there's like something like a window where like a person on each side could see each other. But a lot of the images are like about immigration and about crossing the border, but also about like the factory. A lot of the images are like furniture that exists in that factory. So I'm thinking about like those dynamics, and so a lot of times I think my work is very layered. It has a lot of like meanings behind it, But I like that. I like work that is complicated. That it's not just like kind of black and white, but there's a lot of things that are being said in the work, and so that was cool. Like I even like we did like a performance because I wasn't able to because during the pandemic, it was like I was unable to have like a big show, or like it was kind of like people had to kind of wear masks. It was like not a lot of people were going to shows. But I wanted to do the show because I thought it was important, and I didn't have to do the show. Like a lot of people didn't do their first year reviews because of that, and they kind of gave us the choice to be like, you can do it or you don't, but you don't have to do it. But I chose to do it because I'm like, what am I here for? I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn how to put up a show, how to do a show. So I decided to do a show. I brought in a lot of my family. I used the show as an excuse to kind of come together, right? To bring some of my family members that maybe don't come around as much, or to work with them, because I saw kind of that the world was kind of changing and there was something going on, right? That was like something that we needed to kind of be ready for as a family. And so I invited them to collaborate. We did like different things around the table. We worked with the wood dust. We made like masks. I did a performance on top of the table where I go on the table and I play like this. I become like this shaman, which is like this alter egos that I like to come up with. They're different personalities, different people. And so in this case, it was this shaman that kind of was playing the drums on top of the table, right, to kind of own it in a way, to be able to do this almost like intervention on the table. And the only it was actually just for my mom and my sobrino, my nephew that lived in that house, because we did the performance at my mom's house.
And this was in Santa Ana.
Yeah, in Santa Ana, in front of the Bars Museum. My mom lives there, and so we used the front of the house as a gallery, in thinking about like spaces, right, and how to use spaces and be able to make space for ourselves.
That's interesting. Using the front of your mother's house in Santa Ana as a public exhibition space, I think is really interesting, which reminds me of the Land of Milk and Honey project that we did, right, where we commissioned you to do a site-specific border-based project, right, where that's the first iteration where we see the table and chairs first come out, including the integration of pulque as a ceremonial aspect, and then the character of tuleño. I was wondering and seeing how that connects to your experience as a furniture maker, but also this previous project that you did and exhibited in Santa Ana. So can you unpack a little bit about that project for the Land of Milk and Honey exhibition?
Yeah. The project is kind of like another table, right? It's like it's kind of like a continuation of thinking about like the idea of tables, or who gathers around these kind of tables, right, and what these tables represent. So I was thinking about like how to think about borders in this way where we're actually thinking deeply about materiality and what the materials mean, and where they're found, and who's able to use the materials and for what purpose. And so for this other giant table was like it was after going to a residency in Michoacán in Marabatio, Huapamacátaro. I was invited by a friend. His name's Dino Dinko. I was his TA in UCSD, so he invited me to go down there. And while I was down there, because of like my practice and who I am as a person, undocumented person, I was very interested in kind of making that experience to be able to do what I was doing here over there, to try to bring together people to do work, but mostly like the people that were from that area, because it felt like the residency was kind of more like almost like separate from the people that were around there. So I wanted to bring in the people, that lived around there to work with me and to do different things. We ended up doing like using an abandoned home and turning it into a gallery. And so I brought in a lot of people, and we were just having fun, you know, and that turned out to be the exhibition that we had to do, like we had to show work at the end. So, but what I while I was there, I was able to learn how to weave, because they gave us this workshop to learn how to weave with tule, and that's when I started kind of thinking about the plants, because I was already thinking about the magueyes and how the magueyes were important to as a political statement, or as a way of thinking about a plant that I was used to be super close to in Hidalgo, but then I became super disconnected from it, and so I wanted to kind of reconnect to the plant and start to think about the material aspect of it. And so when I learned how to weave in Michoacan, I started thinking about the plant tule, which is also, I started finding out that it's like very important in our like cosmologies as people from this continent, because it's being used, you know, throughout the continent, and it's been used for many ways, and it's still used. And so I was thinking about how it was growing here, you know, in this side of the border, and I was really thinking about about the politics of who gets to use the plant, and why, and who benefits, right, from this kind of like erasure of practices. Because then if you have this connection to these plants, you kind of have to ask for permission to use them a lot of times, right, unless the plants grow on your property. In this case, the tule grows in water, so it grows a lot. It grows in like private properties most of the time, like government owned, or, you know, reserves, nature reserves. So I was thinking that was important, and to think about creating this this project that brings like people from Mexico over here, and brings kind of some of their practices, and kind of make it like really visible, make a big table, right? Make like this, maybe like something that could be a tourist toy, to make it seem like thinking about like the artist trope, you know, like how like making things big, sometimes it's used just as something that people just do, right, just because it's art, or for the heck of it, which doesn't really have a lot of context behind it. So I was thinking of how to do that, to think about those ideas, but make it more interesting, more important, to have context, to be able to think about these ideas of migration, and these ideas of the art world, right? Because a lot of times the art world puts like, I think, like traditional art or traditional art or artisan art into this category of not being real art, or not being like contemporary enough, right? So I was thinking of how to think about those ideas, and how to bring those ideas into the context, right, into the contemporary art context of why are there this why do we have this structure and this hierarchy of who gets to be like a real artist, or not a real artist, or just an artisan, or just traditional artist, or folkloric, right? Because I think in a lot of my education in school, once I started learning art, I was questioning a lot about my work in those regards, or put into those categories of like folkloric or traditional, right? Like kind of excluding me, right, as an artist. And so I kind of got more like como terco, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I just, instead of like backing away from that and being like, oh, I need to kind of assimilate or become more my aesthetic needs to become more white or more abstract or something that nobody understands, I started thinking about those ideas of why they exist and the hierarchy that exists within them. And so it was important for me to think about weaving, right, as a traditional practice, and to think about how we can make a work that was conceptual and that was layered and that could be put into a contemporary context, right? And it's just that a lot of times there's a lot of gatekeepers, right? There's a lot of people that pretend like they know or they can say what art is. And so yeah, when we did that, I think it was a difficult project. It took like around like a year. It was like a lot of gathering, a lot of working with other people, working with community, working with my family. But I was very lucky that MexiCali Biennial was invited me to do the performance at the border, because I was kind of already. We had been thinking about like doing like a pulqueria, because that's something that I did for my thesis show, because I was thinking about pulque and how the pulquerias are also another material, right? And something else that is diluted or that is like like the politics make it hard to get here in the United States. It's something that could be very common in Mexico, but it becomes super difficult to get here unless you know people, right? Like the people that might know where it's at. And so I found where they sold it in LA, Center and Imperial. That's where I get it from. And so I started like thinking about ways in which I could use that to make a pulqueria, to give the pulqueria an importance, and so people could think about why pulque is this drink that won't go away, right? Thinking about like almost like things that are meant to be sometimes invisible, sometimes they become more visible through that invisibility that is like that people try to do. And so I was trying to make pulque like give it that importance. So I started doing pulquerias at my thesis show, and then the idea was that I would have a pulqueria at the MexiCali Biennial. But then I was working through the table, the giant table and the chairs, and so we decided to like that it would be cool to have the table and the chairs down there, and to have the pulqueria, right? Because we already knew that there was gonna be a pulqueria, so it's just to make a, because there are tables and chairs on pulqueria, so it's like make a giant chair pulqueria, like but the idea of more making people feel like small, right? And also we started thinking also about the giant table and chairs that are at the broad, and thinking about what that meant, right? Like how I felt when I saw that table, and how I hear a lot of people saying that that table that feels like it feels like a table that people like me, like immigrant people from Mexico, would not have in their house, even though it's giant, of course, because it's giant. But if it was like regular table, we would not have that kind of table. And so I was thinking to make a kind of like a response to that, and thinking about those ideas of like kind of like ideas of the context of the work, and how we could make the context more visible, and the work behind the table more accessible, and so that people could actually see who built the table and what that labor was, right? A lot of it was immigrant labor. And so to bring that into focus, right, into visibility, because I feel like as an immigrant, being invisible is something that was always pushed on me, like kind of having this invisibility, and in a way it was helpful, right? Because then people don't see you, and you will get to kind of survive or be here, right, in the United States. But then like I feel that's interesting, right? So I really, in my work, I think about how to make some of those things that might be invisible sometimes to bring them forward and make them more visible. And even, like my family being involved, like, because those are things that make me an artist, right? Like it's like I'm not just an artist without any context. I'm an artist with a history. I come from a certain place, and I have certain people that shape my thinking, my ways of my choices in art.
Yeah, and it makes sense too because you do a project where you actually get the maguey plant and then you carve into them, right? Like you create drawings or references to your experience here in the United States, but also for where you came from. And then the pulque comes from the maguey plant, right? Like,
Yeah.
And it's an ancient drink. It's a drink that was closely tied to religious ceremonies, for a drink that maybe royalty or even pregnant women were supposed to drink, right? Because it's super nutritious. And so this project, the first one that you did for the MexiCali Biennial at La Casa, La Linea in Calexico, like you had all these elements at play. You had the table of chairs, you had the pulque, you had the ceremony, and then you also had this character of Tuleño. Like, how did Tuleño come about?
Tuleño sin albur comes about. Just thinking about, I was thinking about like the importance of the plant and thinking about like creating a alter ego, or a character that would kind of talk about the plant, or not talk because he doesn't speak. He actually just screams like a Mexican, to kind of emphasize that like background, right, of being Mexican, or being proud or being happy, or this scream that is very representative of the culture. But the screams themselves, right, they're like a language, and so, but the Tuleño represents kind of like a spirit of like the ancestors, or like a spirit that refuses to go away, right, that keeps like hunting us. And so that's how I see these plants, the tule, the maguey, these plants that refuse to go away, right? No matter how much law you put into them, like how much you make them so inaccessible, they're still there. They refuse to go away. And it reveals, I think, the flaws, right, of the border, of what that means. And it reveals a lot of truths about like who belongs here, right? Who the plants belong to, and who the plants have a kinship to, right? And so, because of our connection to those plants, I feel like that's like proof, right, of who we are, and how we belong to this land, to these parts, not exactly to here, but we belong to the continent. We've had like connections to we used to have like migrations, before. We used to have this communication, these systems, and so I think those plants like kind of speak in this way, right? And the spirits of the plants and the spirit of Tuleño is kind of what it's trying to do. Like it's trying to remind us not to fall for the trick of assimilation, of thinking that these other materials that are more like Eurocentric or more white are more important than materials that we've had to survive from. We've had to like use in our regular lives, like our ancestors had to use them, to make baskets, to maybe sleep on a petate, or to eat the roots, or drink pulque, and there's like all this kinship to the plants, right? There's all these things that the plant can say, right, if we pay attention to it. And so I was thinking about, like how the plants can be like a big vehicle for that, to have those conversations, and to think about how to also to have fun, to make a performance that is like also fun. And so I think like serving pulque to people, or teaching people how to weave with tule, are all kind of, in a way, they're they're like, I feel like to me they're super interesting, but also like I think the experience of being with people and having these conversations, and like when you're at pulqueria, right, having these kind of deep conversations, I think those are also important, and they're also part of the work.
Mm-hmm. There's also a really interesting interactive aspect to the piece too, right? Because you think of sculpture as like something that you bump into when you're looking at a painting, or something that you can walk around. But the table and chair installation becomes almost like a character in this performance, right? It's an interactive element where people could go under the table. And there's an interesting correlation between being paid under the table and then people going under the table. And then when you go under the table, there's another level of appreciation because you have text and poetry. You can interact with that way. And then you can also climb on the chairs, right? And so it's like sculpture that you don't just look at, but you interact with and you play with, and it becomes part of that performance and that installation, which is something that, was something that people really respond well to. Not just the size, scale, relationship, the color, but the fact of the interactivity of it. You also mentioned something that, when we first showed this at the border, there were family members that couldn't experience that, right? And your installation, your solo exhibition is the first exhibition we have here at the MexxiCali Biennial Lab in Whittier. And I feel like this becomes more of a neutral space for your family, your members to actually experience that and bring that project, that border-based project, and open it up to a newer audience. So how do you feel about, reintroducing that project or revisiting that project here versus at the border?
Yeah, I thought it was important because I felt like because my family or friends are important to a lot of the work. Sometimes when I was in UC San Diego and when I had this show down there in Calexico, it's like it's like hard to, well, like I invite people, right? But I know that sometimes they can't make it because they're undocumented, and I know that they want to, right? Like my brother, who helped me gather some of the cochinilla for the paintings that I have in the solo show here, he can't really go to San Diego or he crossed like through Calexico, right? And so it also could be like a traumatizing experience, but it's like he would have liked to go and see the piece, and also like some of the people that helped me build the table and chairs, which are other, like a couple that have also been undocumented here for like over 30 years, right? They have families in Mexico and they can't go visit them. Sometimes their family members, pass away, and so it's just like super difficult for them to actually be able to go near like places where immigration could might catch them, right? And so they stay like around the areas, right? Around Santa Ana or LA, or areas where you don't find a lot of immigration. So I was like happy that I could show the work here because they could come and see it. But I think also just other immigrant people that might be around here, that might not be able to see it in the border, because even though the border piece was important and it was like like an intervention, and there probably is, there is people undocumented right there, right, that could have experienced it. I think that it makes it hard for some people that I know out here, but also people that might be immigrants could also come and think about those ideas, right? And see themselves kind of almost not represented, but maybe feel like they could come to a place, right, to a gallery. A lot of times I feel like immigrant people don't feel welcome in these white spaces, and so they don't really get to experience art in that way, and so I think I was trying to make it like kind of welcoming for people, immigrant people, people of color, Mexican people that might be very that might recognize the aesthetic, recognize the table and the chairs, feel comfortable. Like I see a lot of people walking outside and looking through the window, and they like want to go inside, come inside, And so I think it's like the aesthetic. I was thinking about like how it could be welcoming to our people, to us, because a lot of times in these other places, you feel like you're not welcome, like even in the big cherry tables in the bro, you can't touch them, you can't go on them, right? Even though people would like to go on them, like, so it's like, yeah, those are the questions, right, that I'm exploring, like why is it that there's this hierarchy, and why is it that art sometimes has these rules, it has this, like, this, I guess, yeah, rules, ways of, like, there has all these blocks or people, like, where people can't really access it, regular people.
Yeah,
and so it becomes, yeah.
I think it's super interesting because this is something that I hear from my students all the time, is they don't feel comfortable in the museum, right? And it goes to the question of who's the art for? And what is art? Who's it for? Who does it serve? What does it say? Who owns it? Who gets to experience it? And for some of my students, they don't feel comfortable in museums. They don't think that they belong there. They think that that's maybe for a different social class or an intellectual class that they're not part of. They have to pay admission. And then when they go to these institutions, they don't see themselves represented, right? Whether it's represented through the art, through the artists, or even programs that institutions produce. And so there becomes a big disconnect. And I think that art's for everyone, right? Or at least it should be accessible for everyone. It's not just for the intelligentsia. It's not just for the wealthy. It's for everything. And so when I see work that you're doing, or a practice like yours, where it's really about art being for everyone and welcoming the participant, not only to experience the art visually, but to experience the art physically, I think that's super amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, part of this project is also looking at paranormal borders, not only physical borders, but maybe real or imagined borders. And so for the next round of the MexiCali Biennial, we're looking at the border defined through a paranormal lens, through thin spaces. And I think some of this came about through experiencing the border itself, because it's this strong physical boundary that has a vertical orientation and a horizontal orientation. And then in between the bars, you get to see the other side. So you get to see the physical existence of that border, but you can see through it. You can talk about the border as this liminal space, this in-between space, but for the people that live there, it's a very physical part of their landscape. It's something that they have to maneuver, they have to traverse, they have to contend with. It's part of the landscape. So we started looking at the border as a portal to the other side, and wondering what would the diagonal angle of a border that's vertical and horizontal be, and the cast shadows, looking at the shadows or looking at different aspects of it. So as we go further into this Paranormal Borders exhibition, we're asking artists and creatives if they've ever had a paranormal experience or something out of normal experience, and if that's even affected or influenced their artwork. And is there anything that you'd like to share about your experience, your paranormal experiences growing up in Mexico or growing up here in the United States that you feel is a little out of the ordinary?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times, like, when, like, if you, at least for me, like, since I was born in Mexico, in a rancho, a place where it's not the city, right? It's very rural. There is a lot of like things that deal with the paranormal. There is a lot of like ideas. I think it's almost like it's embedded in the way that people live their lives, live our lives. Like there's different ideas that you don't find here in the city, right? So it's almost like a different reality, and so things that might looked on as like kind of maybe not as because I think in the city there's a lot of thinking about like things that are scientifically proven, or there's a lot of that, I don't know, disconnection to some of the ways that other people think, and so there's a lot of like thinking that people that are from these places are kind of ignorant, right, for believing a lot of these ideas. But those ideas are I think are there for a reason sometimes, right? They're part of the land. They're part of who people are. And so there is a lot of stories in los ranchos, right, about like ghosts and duendes and brujas and things that were very normal to to us, right? Even though they might sound like paranormal, they become kind of normal because you get used to them. Even though you're still afraid of them, they're just all that. Like a lot of times they're there, like when you're like sitting or drinking or just sitting around the table talking about stories with your family, and there's also things, right, like limpias and like con mal de ojo that are like that people like believe in and get, right, when you're there, and there's ways like to cure yourself, like through limpias and stuff that we don't do here. Well, maybe they do in some places, right? People do, but not as much as you do it in Mexico, or at least for in my experience. Like I used to have, like, my mom sometimes, if I felt sick, me hacía una limpia, like a limpia with a huevo and ruda, and so she would just like just kind of brush these plants all over my body and like and whether it works or not, it's like it's a way of life, right? It's a way of doing things, but like crossing the border like makes those practices kind of, it erases them, like where we don't do it anymore, right? And even like altares de muerto and stuff, because I think a lot the family has this idea of like how we're in the United States now, like those things are part of the past. So it does have this kind of like almost like a time machine kind of effect where things become part of the past, right? Things that are maybe not as important anymore, that because now we're in the city and we have to kind of assimilate and get with the groove, right? Because otherwise you get like made fun of, right? Even if you're a paisa, if you like when I went to school, like I was a total like paisa, I had like cowboy
explain to
boots.
the audience what a paisa is.
It's somebody from rural side of Mexico, like somebody that wears boots like a cowboy almost, right? And like my brother, he gifted me these boots, right? To us, it was cool, and I would wear the boots to my school.
Bota picudas.
Yeah, picudas, botas, no tanto así como de.
You can't hold on to them when you're walking.
Pero like I was made fun of because people were not used to that. So in a way, it's like it's this normal and things that are not normal, right? Like the paranormal could have different meanings, I think. But there's like there was a lot of things that we were unable to do here that we couldn't do anymore, and so those stories kind of also die away. Like I don't remember a lot of the stories. My dad used to tell me a lot of stories, paranormal stories, right? I was just watching the film Pedro Páramos on Netflix, and I had read the book too. But the reason why I really liked that book was because of the rural aspect of it, right? It's in a rancho, and the language also is very like accessible to me. Like people that come from ranchos speak a certain way, like it's almost like an indigenous language, even though it's still Spanish. But like I really like that film because it did feel a lot like the life in El Rancho, right? How you hear all these stories about brujas, about duendes, very like crazy stories, right? And I feel like once I came here, we came here as a family. We that became paranormal. Like that became something that we don't talk about.
The normal became paranormal.
Yeah, it became kind of like something even like could be also like shameful, right? To think that those things have any credibility, right? And so I've had like experiences myself, with some stuff that was like that would be considered paranormal, but that's just through my, I think, curiosity of thinking about like how people have all these stories, right? And like what we choose to believe or what we choose not to believe, right? Like there's like something there. And so I think one of my experiences was an outer body experience that I had, where I did start thinking a lot about like the importance of like kind of who we are and how there's things that we might not know, that things are not as normal as we think they are. I think we try to make ourselves believe that things are normal because it's probably like a human reaction to kind of feel safe, to think that the world is not fucking like moving around us. Like, there's all these parts to it that, potentially anything could happen, right? Like things could be like very chaotic. And so I think that like, that experience was interesting, it made me see things a different way. But also like seeing kind of things like something on the sky, that was very like paranormal. It was very like something that it's hard to explain what it was, but I did see it, and I feel like, like I can't really say what it was, but I saw something that I was like, okay, this is no longer a story that somebody's telling me. It's something that I'm experiencing, and so it's something I really can't explain what it is, but it's just kind of, I think of it like being things that might be there, and that like I feel like a lot of people, like a lot of their stories, like because I feel like we have to kind of in a way believe some of the stories, because it's not like I feel like if you don't believe them, then you're kind of denying something. But I think also being skeptical too is good, because sometimes people could use stories like this to manipulate or to do things that are might not be as good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that let's see, other.
You can have like a pre-colonial explanation or post-colonial explanation, or from a Mexican perspective or an American perspective. All these experiences that we see, right? In the past, it could have been attributed to like gods or supernatural beings. Now it could be like, oh, they're just like Chinese balloons, or they're drones flying in the sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see how, depending on what filter you apply to how you're experiencing these things, that's how you explain them, either being true or not, or
Mm-hmm.
explain them away even.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was interesting how, being here in the United States for you early on, the practice of being invisible was like a survival tactic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of how to maintain and how to survive. But then there's also that pressure to assimilate, right? To be part of the community that you're in, or finding a community that you can even belong to. So it's interesting how much of these ideas are, filtered through our experiences, and then also from perspectives, and from your point of view, like multiple perspectives, right? The Mexican perspective, the immigrant perspective, the American perspective, the artist perspective, the student perspective, and I think that all that kind of feeds into your art practice too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it all layers. There's a lot of layers, because I feel like my experience as a person has been very layered. Like I have been like, I feel like my experience as an immigrant put me through a lot of like different like challenges. Like I was like I worked doing like an ice cream, like paletero, man. When I was like younger, my dad like kind of put me in that job, right, because he wanted me to get like experience in the workforce. And it was like a horrible experience, but I learned a lot from it. I think it's like, in a way, it did teach me a lot about like life, like some things that are important in life, like appreciating certain privileges. And I feel like like as a non-documented person, you get put into this situation where it could be even dangerous. You could be you put yourself in these places where it's could be harmful, to a person, but you have to also be able to survive and kind of like take the best out of those situations to grow as a person and not to give up. We also, I think, going through, like, when we first crossed a lot, like one of the things that we would do is go through, like, go collect cans in the garbage from, like, the Newport Beach, all those beaches right there in Orange County. And so having to get up early in the morning, and going, like, during the Saturday, Sunday, right? Because that's when everybody gets drunk, and so a lot of the beer cans end up in the trash. So we go as a family, unit, and collect these things. But there's also, like, racist people, that attack you for going through their trash. But trash, in a way, it's like public, so they're really, like, they're just racist. They like it's not illegal to go through people's trash, because trash, it's public, and so but we got attacked a lot of times by racist people. When I was a paletero, there was, like, a lot of experiences where I was, like, put in this, where they would call the cops on me, or they would, like, if I would go into this, like, a nice neighborhood, they would right away, like, ask me if I had, like, a permit to be there. So I felt very, like, a lot of times I felt very attacked, and so I feel that contributed a lot to my experience as a person now. Like, I took a lot of that in, and so I think it's being reflected in the work. But yeah, like, I was, like, yeah.
What kind of advice? I mean, so looking through the trajectory of your art practice and your experiences coming here into this country and working as a fine art artist that has a master's degree, what kind of advice do you have for young artists that maybe are in your similar position, and looking to the arts as a way of kind of expressing themselves or as a career goal?
I feel like, at least for me, it was like kind of just staying focused, and not, like not giving up. I guess not stopping, and just as an artist, I feel like, a lot of times, it's something that you do anyway. So just do it anyway. Just keep doing it, and then see where that leads you, where that takes you. Like, it could lead you to, like, if you are interested in exploring, higher education. I think it's a way, to be an artist. I don't think it's the only way, but sometimes there are these pathways, right? That different pathways people could take. And I feel for me it was more like a choice. It was like a choice, because I felt like that was the pathway that I needed to take to be taken seriously as an artist, or to be even more visible, right? Because invisibility is always, like, as an artist, a lot of times I was invisible because I was undocumented. So I felt like the institutional way, the university was a way to become more visible, because also, like, the story needs, like, the expression, right? The experience needs to be kind of, in a way, told through a lens that has been through that, like, through a person that has experienced those things. And so I feel those things are important, so that other people are not talking for us, because we it's not that we don't have a voice, it's just that we are made to be seen or to be taken as invisible or unimportant. But I think that the immigrant community, the immigrant people are, like, very smart. They know about, like, survival. They know about how to. They a lot of times they know how to work with their hands. They could do things. They do things for artists. They do artistic things. They come from these backgrounds that where they know how to do a lot of things. A lot of times they know how to dye. They know how to weave. They know how to work in wood shop. I mean, a a lot of immigrant people here work in like construction. You know, they know how to build stuff, and those things are artistic in themselves. You know, and it's not that. It's just that people are unable to see that or unable to take us serious as artists. You know, I feel like a lot of times artists, immigrant people are more like they're artists because they get to recreate a whole new life. You know, they come from Mexico with nothing, and then they have to kind of create this whole new life, somewhere where they're not wanted, and they feel like they might not belong. And so it's like it's kind of trying to see art in different ways so that I don't just focus in or fall into this trap of like trying to kind of regurgitate, ¿cómo se dice?
Mm-hmm.
Regurgitate like Western ideals or ideas.
And to quote the famous Dolores Huerta, si se puede, right?
Si se puede, yeah. I think I'm a good example of that, right? Like, like a lot of kids that are, you know, que nacen aquí, tienen papeles. A lot of times los papeles is something that keeps us from exploring these avenues, right? Y para mí como que coming from that kind of background, from nothing, right, and just being kind of just keeping at it, you know, it helped me kind of become a better artist. It's like you're not just gonna become a great artist right away, you know. Sometimes, you know, talent is not really like, yeah. So it's good to have talent, you know. A lot of times I think talented people get lazy, right? I think it's important to work at your work, whether you're talented or not. If that's what you want to do, if that's what you feel, you know, just keep working on it. No matter what people tell you, I think a lot of times for me is like people didn't really understand what I was doing. My family didn't really. My dad didn't understand it, you know. But I think because I just kept at it, that I started like thinking deeply or coming into all these other ideas. And exploring the possibilities and thinking more deeply and conceptually about the work.
Awesome. Well, where can people find your work? How are you on social media? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I have a website and I'm on social media. My website is isidroperezgarcia.com, and you can find some pictures there of some of the work that I've been doing. And also my Instagram is chilote with 5 E's at the end. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story, your artistic practice with us, and we look forward to working on more projects in the future. And I thank you for being on the Paranormal Borders podcast.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.